Good morning, everyone. We're happy to greet you this day, second day of our international conference. It is my pleasure to be your host for this first half of the day. We are here with most of our presenters, plenary presenters, and I would like to take this opportunity to greet our first speaker, who is Dr. Denis Kaiser, coming all the way from Andrews University, United States, but originally from closer, from Germany. He is no stranger to this place because he has taught in the past a number of classes as part of our MA program from Andrews University. So I'd like to say a few words about him, about his work. Dr. Denis Kaiser is an associate professor of church history at the Seventh-day Adventist Seminary at Andrews University. His specialty lies in the history of Adventist theology and Ellen White studies. He's the author of Trust and Doubt, Perceptions of the Divine Inspiration in Seventh-day Adventist History, a book released in 2019. And he's a co-editor of the Oxford Handbook of Seventh-day Adventism, about which you probably have heard, to be released soon, probably 2-3 months from now, 2024. He and his wife, Angelica, have 2 daughters that are to them a source of amazement and joy. The topic he will be sharing with us today is Adventist Studies as an academic discipline, innovations, challenges, opportunities. So the microphone is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be back to Czernica. It has been a number of years now. I don't know if it's 5 years or 6 years, but it's good to be back. Yeah? And I also want to thank you for the invitation. It's nice to meet friends and to make new friends. Yeah? This morning, I would like to talk about Adventist studies as an academic discipline. Look at innovations, like the last 20 years or so, challenges, opportunities, looking forward. We have nothing to fear for the future, except as we shall forget the way the Lord has led us and His teaching in our past history. Now, these words were penned by Ellen White more than 131 years ago in her address to the delegates of the 1890 General Conference session. A closer look at the immediate context of that statement shows that Ellen White pointed to the global results of the Church's organization and mission as evidence of God's leading, encouraging confidence in Christ as our leader. Thus, in her view, the success of the Church's mission was directly dependent on Christ's leading and guidance. And that's a thing that we all understand. Yeah? We need Christ. Further, in her view, the future success of the Church's mission work was dependent on our memory of Christ's leading in the Church's history. While some people may say that they are more interested in the present and future than in the past, I dare to suggest that we all are historically minded people. We all remember our lives in the form of episodes and stories. We are wired this way. We may not remember all the details, but all those stories form a broad narrative in our memory. We integrate new information, new experiences, and new events into that narrative, and we interpret those new things through the lens of that narrative. So since we experience, encounter, and learn new things all the time, that narrative is not static, but is continually shaped. By feeding our minds with certain thoughts, we shape our brains, and as a result, we strengthen or weaken our minds. Now, we all learn from others, whether those teaching us as our parents, pastors, teachers, peers, colleagues, and so on. While they may have acquired some new insights and new knowledge, many of the things they teach us, they learned from others. And as teachers, we have to admit that that's the case. Thus, we all learn in one way or another from those that went before us. Now think about this. By learning from those that went before us, you may learn from the greatest human minds that walked this earth. Of course, we should not feel bound by their thought, but we may learn from both their successes and failures. And by deliberately choosing who you want to learn from, you select examples and role models you want to imitate, and hopefully you will grow beyond them. That's the goal that we have as teachers, as good educators, that our students grow beyond us. Now, what does that have to do with Adventist history? Our history is populated with some of the greatest minds that this church has brought forth. Of course, they were fallen humans like us, with mistakes, weaknesses, and failures. Apart from Christ, there is no perfect example in our human history. But that is exactly the point. In our history, we find people like us. We can relate to them, we can identify with them, and in this way, we may learn from both their successes and failures, spiritually and theologically, in the pastoral realm and in the administrative realm, when it comes to leadership and when it comes to servanthood, as it relates to women and as it relates to men, for children and adults, and so on. There are stories for all of us. But how can I learn from them? Where can I read about them? Where can I find what they have written? Well, welcome to the academic discipline of Adventist studies. In this presentation, I would like to give you an overview of an academic discipline that is unique to Seventh-day Adventism. While you may write a thesis or a dissertation on a topic related to Adventist history, also in the public education sector, it is unlikely that you will receive the same mentoring as in an Adventist education context, simply because non-Adventist professors are usually not as familiar with and not experts on Adventist history. I want to talk about innovations in this discipline in the last 20 years, challenges that this discipline experiences, and several potential opportunities of this discipline. Now, in the last 20 years, we have seen that Adventist studies as an academic discipline has become more alive. This is evident from academic publications and several endeavors that make Adventist studies research available to a broader audience. I will focus here on the Adventist Studies program at Andrews, the Adventist Pioneer Series, various online databases, and the Ellen G. White and Adventist Studies Graduate Certificate Program. And you actually have somebody here who is from that program. Yeah. In 1985, the Department of Church History at the Theological Seminary at Andrews University began offering Adventist studies as a PhD in religion program emphasis. It was the only program of its kind in the world, providing opportunities to expand the frontiers of knowledge regarding Adventism. Although a few other Adventist universities have attempted to offer this emphasis too, as a part of their doctoral curricula, those programs usually suffered from the shortage of specialized faculty to provide a rich mentoring of their doctoral students. While the PhD emphasis in Adventist studies obviously deals with Adventist history, it may not be as clear what it entails. So Adventist historical research may be pursued from a variety of angles. And to do that effectively, it is certainly helpful to have some expertise in those additional areas as well. Thus, Adventist historical research may be pursued from the perspective of, for example, the history of biblical interpretation, the history of theology, the history of pastoral ministry, the history of missions, social, cultural history, and of course, the history of events in the lives of individuals. So if you have an expertise in exegesis, you can actually pursue Adventist studies because you are more equipped to evaluate whether what the early Adventist pioneers did is good exegesis or not. So more than a dozen students have completed their doctoral coursework and successfully defended doctoral dissertations in Adventist studies since then, with the dissertations giving evidence of the quality of the program. Now, turning to another subject here. For the last 20 years, the Review and Herald Publishing Association, and then since 2014, the Pacific Press Publishing Association has published 14 volumes of the Adventist Pioneer Series, containing biographies on James White, Joseph Bates, Prescott, John Harvey Kellogg, Ellen White, Louis Sheaf, A.T. Jones, J.N. Loughborough, Uriah Smith, A.G. Daniels, S.N. Haskell, John Byington, J.N. Andrews, and George Butler just very recently. The series was edited by George Knight, Emeritus Professor of Church History at the seminary. Although Knight started out as an educator, and I know we have some educators here too, and he did not think that he would ever be able to publish anything that was publishable. He became the most prolific Adventist author of modern time. Let that sink in. So if you think you can publish, well, try. He offered fresh insights into the history of the church and popularized scholarly findings. The same may be said about the Adventist Pioneer Series, which attracted the interest of both scholars and lay people to new findings of in-depth research into the lives, work, and thought of early Adventist pioneers, thus providing a lens to look through them at Ellen White and the history of the church. The series has become the largest biography series to be published in Adventism, and it's slated to continue with at least 8 more volumes, if not more, now with me as the editor. The last 20 years have also witnessed the digitization of a huge number of historic Adventist materials. Those efforts have been spearheaded by the General Conference Office of Archives, Statistics, and Research, in short, ASTR. And I know we have somebody here from ASTR. And so initially it was under Bert Holowiak and then later under David Trim, the directors of that office, in the last 20 years. And under Holowiak's pioneering leadership, the office made available online 1.5 million digitized pages. 1.5 million digitized pages. The collection consists of scans of periodical issues, committee minutes, books, tracts, yearbooks, and other materials. Through the adoption of optical character recognition technology, in short OCR, researchers were enabled for the first time to search those records by keywords and key phrases, but when you look at it, you have a copy of the original. It's not just a transcribed text. You can print it out and say, look, I have a copy of the original. Adventist study scholars are indebted to Holowiak for this visionary step, since this has made their research not only easier, but also faster, more efficient, and more accurate. Another endeavor coming out of ASTR is the online Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists, which contains articles on individuals, institutions, topics, events, and administrative units. It is the Church's first online reference work, and it was started in July 2020. And it's projected to have approximately 8,500 articles with accompanying photographs, media, and original documents. Read some of those stories of people from our history, and you will find that a lot of the stories are really inspiring and encouraging. But to make it in there as a biography, first you have to die. Only dead people are included. The editorial team of the encyclopedia is constantly searching for authors from different parts of the world, since it will be far easier for somebody, say from Romania, to write an article about people, topics, administrative units, specifically connected to Romania, than for somebody in the US. Except for articles on the history of theology and ethics, articles on most other topics may be written by anybody interested to write. Even if you're a bachelor's student, you can do it. Of course, all information should be based on documentary evidence. You can't just make things up of thin air. And all articles will be peer-reviewed and edited before they are published online. Now, apart from the work of ASTR, the Ellen White Estate has advanced their own digital media resources. So during the 2000s, the White Estate issued an Ellen White Writings Comprehensive Research CD-ROM for both CT and Mac users. I was still using it until recently, but now not anymore. That CD-ROM gave local access on your computer in text-searchable format to all of Ellen White's published writings and several biographies, reference works, research documents, as well as periodicals and works of Adventist pioneers. Since then, access to those resources has transitioned from local access to online access. Now, all those materials, including all of Ellen White's letters and manuscripts, which previously were unpublished, as well as her books in more than 150 languages, which includes also Romanian, are available on the Ellen White Writings website. In addition, the White Estate has given access to scans of James White's correspondence, James Edson White's correspondence, and the incoming correspondence combined more than 53,000 letters. And you have scans of original documents that you can download or print out. Willie White's letter books, those are 59 letter books over a period of nearly 30 years. Nearly 6,000 White Estate document files and more than 1,500 question-answer files and almost 7,000 photographs and images and many more materials. Another major project of the White Estate has been the annotation of Ellen White's letters and manuscripts, which involved the dating of undated documents, the identification of every recipient and people mentioned, the providing of background information for events, times, topics, and publications, as well as the explanation of archaic terms. Especially those of us that are foreigners and not native speakers, sometimes you read things in Ellen White's writings and you're like, what does it mean? I don't understand the words. Yeah? And sometimes that's because those words are archaic words, yeah? So they have to be explained. This project has taken up more time than originally anticipated and ran through 3 annotators. Roland Carman, who annotated the documents in Volume 1, Stan Hickerson, who started the work for Volume 2 but passed away after 3 years, and then myself, who had assisted both Carman and Hickerson since 2011, and I resumed work and completed the work on Volume 2. It took 10 to 12 years to complete Volume 1, covering the period from 1845 to 1859, and the book was eventually published in 2014. Volume 2, which covers the period from 1860 to 1863, just 4 years, but the same number of documents. It took 8 to 10 years to be completed, and it will be published this year, hopefully even this month. Yeah? The annotations allow readers literally to read between the lines and to discover the outcome of an event, instruction, or prediction found in letter. Ellen White wrote advice to people, and often we don't know why she did that, or what happened to these people, what did they do, did they receive it or not, and here you have the background information. Yeah? Another significant online database is the Adventist Digital Library, in short ADL, which was officially launched in 2015, funded by the General Conference, the Ellen White Estate, Andrews University, and then the Association of Adventist Librarians. About a dozen institutions have contributed materials to ADL. While many of the resources are also found on the website of ASTR, especially the periodicals, ADL makes available the contents of multiple manuscript collections, photograph collections, books, tracts, and pamphlets from the holdings of the Center for Adventist Research at Andrews University. That is unique. Those are unique materials that are found nowhere else. Besides making available Seventh-day Adventist resources, ADL also makes available Adventist-related materials, such as from the Millerite movement or the Church of God Seventh-day, which is an offshoot group, and other groups, because it allows you to research these materials. Soon users will be able to switch the interface and menu between English and several European languages. They will be able to search materials in multiple languages. Further, it is planned to allow for the creation of multiple interfaces for Adventist institutions, regions, language groups, and so on, thus permitting unique, customized online databases. So Romania could be part of this. Huh? Since most Adventist colleges and universities do not have teachers with a graduate training in Adventist studies, Ellen White studies, or church history, courses in Adventist history and Ellen White are generally taught by teachers with other specialties. That's the default in most of our schools worldwide. They are usually chosen to teach those courses because either they take an interest in Adventist studies, or they are simply the youngest faculty member on the team. You could say the new kid on the block. Yeah? You can do this. Yeah? Anybody can do this. Yeah? Ideally, like in any other discipline, those teaching Adventist studies courses have a graduate training in that discipline. But in general, that is not feasible, as I will explain below, further on. Yeah? Therefore, to accommodate to that situation, the seminary, together with the Ellen White Estate, has offered the Ellen G. White in Adventist Studies Graduate Certificate, through which current and prospective teachers of said courses will be able to develop a minimum competency in Adventist Studies. If you already have a doctorate in another area, we can't expect you to do another doctorate. Yeah? So it's a minimum competency. Over the course of 3 years, they are attending 3 intensives with 2 courses each in conjunction with 1 or 4 cohorts in different parts of the world. Thus, they earn 18 US graduate credits, which may be partially applied towards a doctoral emphasis or cognate in Adventist Studies at one of the 3 General Conference schools, so Andrews, IAS in the Philippines, and AUA in Kenya. The General Conference has been covering the subsidized tuition, and the divisions in the employing colleges and universities have been partnering in covering the expenses of accommodation, meals, and travel. Due to the economic commitment of the divisions and schools, only students are eligible to apply to the program who were recommended by their schools via the education secretary of the respective divisions. And 2 cohorts have been completed. Among them is also Dr. Adrian Petre, and so we are really pleased with the outcome. Yeah? And so we see that many of the teachers are passionate and say, well, if I could, I would do another doctorate in this area. Yeah? So in the last 20 years, there have been several innovative developments, certainly far more than those that I mentioned, yeah? In the area of academics, research, technology, and education that are encouraging, exciting, and inspiring. But the discipline of Adventist Studies also faces severe challenges. So this discipline is grappling with severe challenges both on the academic level and in the church. This section now will address some of those challenges, and while one could certainly expand more on each of them and also add more challenges to the list, I will address only the challenges presented by a prevalent present tense culture, the quest for a usable past, the lack of trained Adventist Studies scholars in ministerial training, the triangle of funding, time, and quality, and the lack of a proper Adventist Studies methodology. In the global north, and we are part of this, we are surrounded and influenced by an aggressive present tense culture that constantly changes according to the mood of the moment. We can see this especially in social media, news outlets, fashion trends, popular music culture, worship styles, and so on. Posts on social media that attract the attention of thousands of people today are forgotten tomorrow, because each day there's a new flurry of exciting news and new posts. Trends in other areas of our surrounding culture may not come at the same pace, not every day, but they are definitely not slow either. Whatever is old appears to be outdated and irrelevant. As we attempt to talk about the Adventist past, we are competing with a culture that deems nearly anything irrelevant that does not appear to have a connection to our world today. And I say appear. Yeah? At best, we consume those things that meet our needs, and we ignore the rest, says John Fee. Thus, we are tempted to either ignore Adventist history altogether or select only those things that appeal to us in the moment for their perceived present-day relevance. Regarding the usability of their own past, Seventh-day Adventists often appear to oscillate between 2 extremes. Those that glorify the past as the promised land, we have to return to that, and those that blast the past as a form of tyranny that holds them back. Whereas some perceive the time of the pioneers as an era of God's direct guidance and superintendence, a spiritual phenomenon they feel is absent from the church today, others see in the pioneers only insensitive, law-oriented exclusivists characterized by a spirit that they rather want to leave behind in their pursuit for happiness. Of course, those descriptions are certainly overblown, but there is a kernel of truth in those depictions. While the first type of people explore the past to cement an unchangeable Adventist tradition from which the denomination has strayed away and to which it should return, the second type of people investigates the past to demythologize it from its alleged divine superintendence. Thus, both types of people employ the past in search of a usable past for their respective goals, either to maintain continuity with the past or to break away from what appears to hold us back in search of a better future. In my experience, I find that both types of people, in their quest for a usable past, choose sources that fit their goal. Yet, as a result, they are not researching the past and the people that populate it for their own sake. Rather, the past is put to use for a specific agenda, a quest that is frequently characterized by a selective use of the documentary evidence, a moralizing portrayal of certain players in Adventist history, and a high number of speculative interpretations. And that's, I would say, a challenge and a problem. Now, although Seventh-day Adventists trace their origins back to the Millerite and early Sabbatarian Adventist movements from the 1830s to the 1850s, their very name suggests a focus on the present and the future, not necessarily the past. Seventh-day Adventists long for God's presence with us in both time, the seventh-day Sabbath, and space, the second Advent. We are Seventh-day Adventists. We yearn for Christ to be here with us on the Sabbath. And we yearn for him to be with us when he comes back. So it's both in time and space. Therefore, most of our activities target the here and now as well as the future. That is, for example, improving people's physical, intellectual, emotional, social, and spiritual well-being, as well as sharing the good news of salvation with people to prepare them for Christ's second coming and a glorious future with him. This affects our training of future pastors. With some exceptions, most of the approximately 120 Adventist colleges and universities worldwide offer to their undergraduate ministerial students 1 to 2 courses in Adventist history and Ellen White out of like 4 years. Yeah? And the picture is not much different on the graduate level. If there are only 1 to 2 additional courses on church history, there are too few church history or Adventist history or Ellen White courses to justify a full budget for an expert in that broader discipline. Therefore, at least on the undergraduate level, those courses are frequently taught by a faculty member with a specialty in a different discipline. Often, as I said, the newest or youngest member of the Faculty of Theology. This is not a critique against those operating under those circumstances. They are simply trying to do the best they can under those circumstances. So a partial exception is the position of the directors of the network of more than 20 Ellen White research centers and branch offices around the world. Yet although that position, consisting of 50% directorship and 50% teaching, would theoretically permit the hiring of an Adventist Studies, Ellen White Studies specialist, in reality, the educational institutions where those centers are located usually tap a faculty member who is already working at the institution but whose specialty is generally in a different discipline. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was talking to an Ellen White Research Center director, and he said, I have no clue about Ellen White or Adventist history, but I'm so glad that our retired director is still here, because when questions come, I just forward those questions to him, he answers them, and then I send them out. That's more common than you think. Thus, it is only a partial exception, because those Ellen White Studies positions are partially, 50%, funded by the White Estate, but they are often not filled with Ellen White specialists or Adventist history specialists or even church history specialists. Therefore, since most people teaching Adventist studies and Ellen White courses have no graduate training in that area, we find the prevalent attitude that Adventist studies is not a serious academic discipline, but rather a field that anybody with a little bit of training can talk about and teach. During their theological training, ministerial students therefore learn about the basics of the organizational, institutional, educational, missional, and theological development of the Adventist Church, and about the issues of practical hermeneutics surrounding Ellen White. We learn those basics, but they usually do not dive deeper into historic Adventist materials and are not given much opportunity on a practical level how to search through local archives and online databases. Nevertheless, when they start pastoring, many of them encounter some eager church members belonging to one of the two types described before, that employ historic Adventist materials for their agenda, yet those pastors usually do not feel sufficiently equipped to face those church members on an equal footing. And I just mentioned one topic, the Trinity in Adventist history. That's where most pastors say, I'm sorry, I don't have the expertise. From the above challenges arises another challenge, a triple challenge: funding and time for quality research. This triangle of money, time, and quality, and I say quality and depth here, is a systemic predicament in much of Adventist education. Religion professors, including church historians and Adventist historians, the few that exist, it is usually not part of the job description. Or actually, sorry, I missed something here. So religion professors are employed to teach ministerial students. And while doing research and writing is welcomed, it is usually not part of the job description, nor is it required from faculty members. Their job usually consists primarily of teaching and secondarily of service, with no time left for research. If faculty members have the desire to research and write, it generally happens in their personal time. So if your professors produce things, be grateful, because it shows that they have a passion, but they may take away from the time for the family and from their sleep to do it. Yeah? The above triangle, so time, money, and quality, has several inherent problems. First, if faculty members are not given time and money for research, they may be done quickly, but the quality of their research is going to be low. Second, if faculty members are given money for their research, but they desire to produce high-quality research, it will have a low priority if you don't give them time, and it will take them longer to complete it. Third, if faculty members desire to produce high-quality research within a short time, it will turn out to be quite expensive because they have to make use of other people, because they will need quite a lot of money to accomplish that goal. Whereas government and public institutions may give grants to collaborative research projects in technology, the natural sciences, health sciences, social sciences, and so on, they usually do not provide funding for denominational research, research on the history of a church, since it appears to be of lesser value to society at large. With few courses in the academic discipline of church history and Adventist studies, there are only few positions available in that discipline, and few students desiring to pursue advanced education in that discipline. With little time and no money given to those pursuing research and writing in that specific discipline, or theological disciplines in general, only few people can continue their research and to sharpen their skills and expertise that they may continually produce cutting-edge research and advance our knowledge of the past. But there's another ramification. Even though the seminary at Andrews University has been offering a PhD in religion with an emphasis in Adventist studies for the last 30 years, Adventist studies scholars have neglected to develop an Adventist studies methodology. So we're training people, but we don't really hand them a methodology. Therefore, neither those trained in that doctoral program nor those writing a dissertation on an Adventist studies topic in a public or private university setting encountered a particular Adventist studies methodology. In fact, those trained in a secular academic context became generally acquainted with a more secular methodology of pursuing church history, which usually relegates the possibility of divine intervention to the realm of mysticism and myth. While it is certainly true that miraculous events naturally dodge the process of verifying or falsifying the supernatural causes of those events, we can't prove that God was there. We can believe it. But to eliminate a priori the possibility of divine intervention in human affairs leads necessarily to the adoption of a naturalistic method. Therefore, I propose that Adventist studies scholars avoid attempting to explain away the possibility of divine intervention in human affairs, and at the same time avoid trying to prove that God did intervene in human affairs. While we have no means to verify or falsify that God acted in the lives of the Adventist pioneers, we may verify or falsify from the documentary evidence whether they believed that God acted supernaturally at a given time and event, because they wrote about it. So we can say they believed it. Further, we may determine whether various accounts of that event harmonize and therefore prove that the participants held a particular belief and memory in common. Sometimes you have different accounts by different people, 30, 40, 50 years removed, and they differ. And so then you have to see, okay, which sources are more reliable? Most likely more contemporary sources than those that are removed in time. Thus, we may conclude that the accounts of the participants of a certain event are congruent, and they all believe that God had intervened in that event. And while as a researcher I cannot prove that God acted there, as a believer I can say their accounts make sense, they are congruent, and I believe that God did, even though I cannot prove it. The role of church history and Adventist studies is not to prove whether God exists and can intervene in human affairs, but it is its role to reconstruct what happened as far as we can prove it, and what our historical subjects believed, said, wrote, and did, what motivated them, inspired them, hurt them, and so on, as far as we can tell from the documentary evidence. Now, more than 40 years ago, Mormon scholars divided into factions of traditionalists, secularists, and advocates of what they call the new Mormon history. And so they grappled with the challenge of reconciling divine intervention with human history. While church historians once regarded Mormons as a cultic group at the fringes of society, at least in North America, Mormon historians have been able to place their history, the history of Mormonism, into American religious history, and thus make it a part of American history. Now, one may find entire sessions or even sections on the history of Mormonism at professional meetings. If you attend meetings of the Society of Biblical Literature, the American Society of Church History, the American Historical Association, where scholars from various religious traditions engage in dialogue over aspects of Mormon history. So you go there and you sit down, you realize, okay, it's not just Mormons that are discussing these topics, also people that are not Mormons. They have been able to establish their history as a part of American history. In contrast, there are few historians of Adventism, to the point where it's hard to find any Adventist historian presenting on Adventist studies topics at such professional meetings. A colleague and friend of mine, when attending meetings of the American Society of Church History a few years ago, was asked, "Where are you Adventists? We would like to hear from you, but it seems you don't even exist." But besides those challenges that I mentioned, there are also, I think, opportunities. And we may perceive challenges as opportunities. So we have seen multiple innovations in the discipline of Adventist studies, as well as numerous challenges to that discipline. Yet, like in good historical research, it is insufficient to talk only about problems and the good things we're currently doing. We should think ahead and reflect on what else could be done and where we see open doors. In this section, I would like to touch on the potential influence of Adventist study scholars in wider academia. Ideas to come up with funding and time for Adventist study scholars, collaborative research projects and centers for Adventist studies research projects, and several broader research ideas. Church historians of other faith traditions teaching at public and private universities appear to be open to discover more about Seventh-day Adventism, because in their view, this American original, and that's how they refer to us, this American original is a seemingly obscure religious group that has largely operated silently and apart from the limelight. To mention a few non-Adventists who have conducted research on Adventist studies or Ellen White studies, one might refer to Laura L. Vance of Warren Wilson College, Herman Ruttman, an evangelical pastor in Germany, and David F. Holland of Harvard University. They haven't just mentioned Adventists, they have written books or articles, book chapters specifically on Adventists. So while Adventists have engaged in scholarly exchange and discussions and projects at academic conferences, such as the Society of Biblical Literature, the American Society of Overseas Research, that's for archaeologians, and the Evangelical Theological Society, and I know that several of you have been there and presenting there as well. Yeah? I know at least Laurențiu has. Yeah? Their presence at the meetings of societies focusing on church history, such as the American Society of Church History, has been limited, with a few notable exceptions to only occasional encounters. It is certainly commendable for Adventist study scholars to present papers under the umbrella of panels on broader topics. A panel is like a session where you have different presenters. Yeah? And so if somebody presents on a given topic under a broader umbrella, that's good. Yeah? And this draws some attention to the scholarship of Adventist study scholars. However, there have been very few panels or sessions, if any, dealing with Adventism or Ellen White. Maybe we are afraid that other scholars would not be interested in or attracted to such panels. Or maybe we do not think we have enough well-qualified Adventist study scholars to pull such a panel together. Regardless, I observed that other scholars appear to be appreciative when listening to papers on an Adventist studies topic. Giving more visibility to Adventist studies topics could attract more people to study our history and Ellen White. And so by comparison, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known as Mormons, has only one major university. We have many, they have only one. Yeah? However, by maintaining a visible presence at the annual meetings of the American Society of Church History over the past few decades, they have successfully established their past as an integral part of both American history in general and American religious history in particular. Apart from their own engagement in Mormon scholarship, laying heavy stress on faithful authenticity, which I find very interesting. Yeah? So they pay attention to faithful authenticity. Like things have to be accurate, but also they want to be faithful to the tradition. Scholars of other faith traditions have begun to engage in studying Mormonism too. For example, since Southern California has a large community of Mormons, Claremont Graduate University in Claremont, California, has established the Center for Global Mormon Studies to advance scholarly and public understanding of Mormonism around the world. This university is not a Mormon university. It has actually a Methodist background. Yeah? The university, which is affiliated with the United Methodist Church, but ecumenical interreligious by design, permits students to choose a Mormon studies emphasis in a variety of programs that they offer. It appears that a collegial academic culture, which approaches others with openness, also attracts openness towards one's own story and background. This is both a challenge, an invitation, and an opportunity for Adventist studies scholars. To make a step in that direction for Adventist historians, together with David Holland, who's from Harvard University, they approached Oxford University Press, the second oldest and largest academic publisher in the world, with a proposal to publish a major reference work on Seventh-day Adventism, written for a college-educated audience that would be placed in many college and university libraries around the world. Oxford University Press accepted the proposal, and the completed volume is going to be published as the Oxford Handbook of Seventh-day Adventism in June 2024, so just in about 2 months. Yeah? So this is one step to try to bring Adventism to a broader audience and to provide more visibility. Yeah? Now, another possible opportunity. In the absence of public funding for religious research, Adventist studies research depends on institutional, denominational, and private funding of research projects. Awareness of such financial support for research projects is crucial to obtain a reduction of one's teaching load by hiring a substitute teacher, for example, cover travel expenses when traveling to archives, to obtain historic materials, and so on. Since finances are tight in most Adventist schools and universities, institutional funding for research purposes is limited. However, teachers can only keep themselves informed about the most recent scholarly developments if they are given time to read the scholarly literature. The same is true for their research skills and expertise. These are like muscles that grow with use and diminish with disuse. If you don't use your muscles, eventually they will diminish. Yeah? And the same is true with your brains, yeah? And your skills. In this way, time may translate into quality. Yet time is usually directly dependent on funding as well. And so I don't want to brag, but I find that the approach at Andrews University serves as an illustrative example, though it may not be feasible everywhere. But I think it just illustrates what happens when you give people time. At Andrews, professors are allocated 70% of their time to teaching, 20% to research, and 10% to service. This allocation allows most professors to fulfill their teaching obligations in 2 semesters, reserving the third for research and writing. However, actual research time may effectively be only 1 quarter, so just 10 weeks out of 16, due to ongoing responsibilities such as committee work and advising on master theses and doctoral dissertations. Professors have a convention allowance that permits them to travel to an academic and professional conference. I assume that the same is true here, because I've seen Laurențiu and also Adrian at the meetings. All presentations and publications that are based on their scholarship are annually reported and scored in their faculty activity report. So they have to report on what have you done. Based on the score of publications and presentations, professors will receive research award funds. They may cash the money out, or they may get research-related expenses reimbursed, like professional society membership fees, travel to conferences, workshops, research and networking with collaborators, scholarly literature, and so on, with the cash option decreased by 20% to cover tax and benefit costs to the university. So in that sense, if you want to use it for research, you get more. If you just want to have the money, you get less. So in that sense, whoever has receives more. If you do engage in research and publishing, you get more to do more. Professors may further apply for research funds for specific research projects, and based on the review of a very detailed proposal, I had to write one and it had to be extremely detailed. They may receive up to $5,000 to get research expenses reimbursed. That's for 1 year. An amount that may be renewed for up to 2 more years and supplemented with additional funds. For research that requires access to the General Conference Archives of General Conference Office of Archive Statistics and Research, ASTR, that institution may add additional funds. And so I received money for a specific research project. I also had to go to ASTR at the General Conference, and so they provide additional funds for this research project. Apart from those opportunities, professors that may have been on the associate professor level for a minimum of 7 semesters, they may request a sabbatical. So that's 1 semester in addition to the regular research semester to work on a particular research project with the goal of publishing it. In this way, Andrews University provides both time and funds for their professors to produce high-quality research and to stay on top of their expertise and up to date in their academic discipline. Now, some people think that Andrews professors, they're like, wow, they're the best of the best. I think that there are very good people and excellent people all over the world. But if you're not given time and funding, you can't really develop it much. So I think it's not really that they are better. I think it's just that because they are given time, they can produce more. And the same could be true in other places as well, if given the same opportunities. So if students, for example, have difficulties to fund their studies, to pay their tuition through such external funding, like wages could be increased, that they would be able to do that. Yeah? So this can enable payments that sufficiently cover their living expenses and tuition fees. This may not be an issue here, but in some other parts of the world, it is an issue where expenses are so high, tuition is so high that people take student loans to pay for their tuition. But practically you're borrowing from your future because you have to pay these back. Yeah? So moreover, direct involvement in research within their discipline offers students mentoring in various tasks and aspects, fostering improved skills, greater expertise, and a deeper appreciation for their field than classroom learning alone might provide. A few examples may suffice to illustrate what types of Adventist studies research may be approached in such a way. The task of annotating Allenwhite's letters and manuscripts, which span currently from 1845 to 1863, and encompass about 240 documents, has roughly taken 20 years to complete, carried out by the equivalent of 1 to 1.5 full-time individuals at a given time. In contrast, the Ellen White estate houses approximately 3,000 letters and 5,000 manuscripts from Ellen White, highlighting the vastness of her literary output and the significant challenge involved in comprehensively annotating this collection. So if we continue with the same model, maybe our grandchildren will be able to finish it. Yeah? A collaborative research group would allow not only the training of a potential pool of future annotators, but it would also help bring us closer to the goal of annotating all her letters and manuscripts. There are many other, you could say, gaps in Adventist history that cry for research to fill those gaps of knowledge. For example, much of the research and writing of the history of Adventist theology focuses on English language material, especially because most of the digitized material that was made available in online databases is in English. An important question that one might ask is as follows. Since for much of Adventist history, the Seventh-day Adventist Church was non-creedal and opposed to fixed statements of belief, how do we know that the beliefs that were embraced and advocated by English-speaking Adventists were shared by non-English-speaking Adventists in both North America and other parts of the world? Did they follow suit, or were they somewhat resistant to new insights? Were they a little bit behind in the development, or were they way ahead of the development in English-speaking Adventism? Most of the research is just focused on what happened in the English-speaking world. Just because I'm not aware of any such studies does not mean that they do not exist. What happened, for example, in Romania? Yeah? Did Romanian Adventists, were they Trinitarians from the very beginning? Or did they follow suit with the English-speaking world? Or did they lag behind? We don't know. Yeah? Maybe you do. Yeah? I don't. Yeah? So it's a question that comes to mind. And it's particularly spurred by the thought that Seventh-day Adventism is a worldwide movement and not just an American denomination. In addition, this may also be an opportunity for historic, non-English language materials to be digitized and contributed, for example, to ASTR or to the Adventist Digital Library, thus allowing researchers of specific language groups to pursue research in their language-specific materials. But Adventist study is not only about events that are more than a century in the past. Some events may have occurred only a few decades ago, but most eyewitnesses are either no longer alive or their memory is fading. For example, multiple churches have been planted and they may have anniversaries of their founding, yet few are there to tell the story of their beginnings. Talk to them, ask them open questions, and record their account. Nowadays, there are even apps for your smartphone that allow you to conduct oral history interviews, for example, StoryCorps. Yeah? If we do not record those stories when people are still alive, we will no longer be able to do it after they are deceased. So if you're pastoring in a church, identify the older church members. Ask them, how did it begin? Yeah? To conclude, we may be thinking that Adventist studies is only an academic discipline and therefore only relevant to Adventist scholars, not to pastors. other church employees, and church members. It appears that Ellen White thought differently. As she was reminiscing about a recent pastors and canvassers meeting in January 1890, she recorded in her diary the following words. I'm quoting here. There is a work of sacred importance for ministers and people to do. First, the first is my words, so the numbers are for me. They are to study the history of the cause and people of God. Second, they are not to forget the past dealing of God with his people. Third, they are to revive and recount the truths that have come to seem of little value to those who do not know by personal experience of the power and brightness that accompanied them when they were first seen and understood. And fourth, in all their original freshness and power, these truths are to be given to the world. Here, Ellen White pointed to 4 tasks for everybody, but especially for pastors. Those tasks were of sacred importance. In her writings, only few matters received that label. But in her view, all 4 tasks are connected and may be summarized as follows. First, study our history. Second, do not forget how God has led us. Third, talk about the truth that we discovered at the beginning of our movement and revive them to new life. And fourth, share those truths with the world, not as a tradition, but in their original freshness and power. Thus, in our history, there are lessons to learn that will impart a freshness, a power, and a vividness to our mission and to the sharing of our message. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this presentation. We now have about 10 minutes of questions. So we have first one question in the back.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. My question is the following one. How do we reconcile the theological rigidity found in church leadership with the need for academic innovation in theology?
Can you repeat the...
Administration rigidity. How do we reconcile that with academic innovations?
Maybe can you expand a little bit on that?
We see a gap between the General Conference, for example, and the academic research. It's like a very tensioned relationship.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends. So I think it all depends on how people come across. If you, for example, and that's just, I think it's a psychological thing as well. If you push people, they push back. If you tell people they are wrong and you criticize them, then usually they're like, wait a minute. But if you, for example, do it in a faith-affirming way, which doesn't mean that there may not be innovations or that you may not show that some things that there are nuances that we didn't see before, that there are aspects that we didn't see before, and so on, that you can't, let's say, write about those things. But the question is often, well, there's a saying in German, the way how you cry into or like yell into a forest, that's how it's coming back, like the echo is coming back. I have, for example, written about things and I shared it with some colleagues, and I remember one colleague vividly, he said, for example, the BRI, the Biblical Research Institute, they will not publish this. They can't. And I said, I don't know, the feedback that I got was positive. And it was actually published. So they published it in the newsletter, the reflections. And so the same was true with other things. So in that sense, but then I see what this colleague of mine, how he writes about things, and I understand more why he doesn't get a hearing, because it comes across very different. So I think it has a lot to do with how we do it. But of course, when we look at Adventist scholarship in general, there's a whole spectrum. So some things, I would say they are really way out there. I have attended meetings, I think Laurențiu probably as well, where you sit there and you listen to some of your colleagues in academia, and you just shake your head and you wonder if, how they can be Adventists. And I don't perceive myself as a right-wing person. Well, everybody, of course, would perceive that, well, I'm in the middle somewhere. Yeah? But I have people that perceive me as ultra-liberal. I have people that perceive me as ultra-conservative. So I think I'm probably somewhere in the middle. Yeah? But I can understand it. Like, I have also, when I was a student, I sat in, for example, a meeting where a higher church official, for example, said, hey, don't spend so much time like doing your doctoral work or writing a dissertation. Get done, get out, do mission work. And the message that I got was there was no appreciation for research. But there are other people that do appreciate research, especially if it also supports the mission of the church. Yeah? I have a friend, he is responsible for Adventist Heritage Ministries, which takes care of historic sites in North America. Yeah? And it's difficult to convince people to give money to keep up old buildings. Like, why would you do that? How is that connected to the mission of the church? Well, he has been able to show that actually what they are doing with these historic sites is mission work. Yeah? And so maybe just to give you an example, and sometimes we need to say these things that people realize, oh, there is a purpose for research. Yeah? So a lot of research is needed for these people at these sites to tell the stories. Yeah? And so this is just something that I heard last week from the historic Adventist village in Battle Creek. More recently, they have had Mormons, like a whole bus with Mormon historians coming to the village. They have Catholic priests, Methodists, Baptists, a carload of Jews with a rabbi and like other Jews coming, and they go through the village, they listen to the stories, they ask serious questions. There was a point when, for example, a Jewish lady said, you know, I want to get this book, The Great Controversy from Ellen White. I want to read it. And her rabbi says, no, you don't. And she says, yes, I want to. Yeah? I want to know what's in there. Yeah? And so the director of the village asked these people, and it's like, because he's seeing this phenomenon that these people are coming and asking questions. And so he asked, so why are you coming here? Why are you so interested in Adventist history? And they said, well, because you're a worldwide movement. You're a worldwide church. You have a presence in most countries, and you are growing. We don't. We want to know what is different about you. What makes you tick? What is it in your history, like this DNA in your history, that makes you share this message broadly, that pushes you to share it? We want to understand it. And so here we see that somehow our history does something that pushes people to share our message. Yeah? But to know what is this message from there, you have to do research, because there are too many people that say this is the message and that's the message and so on. Yeah? So I don't know, that doesn't fully answer your question because it's very broad, but I think it's, in the end, it's all about trust. And sometimes we are not trusted, and then we have to do things to sow trust. Yeah?
Okay, there's one more question up here.
Thank you. What I see is that there's a lot of fluidity. Everybody does what is right in his own mind, for lack of a method in a way. Yeah? Many people that write about Adventist history are not necessarily trained historians. Some are, but then you see that there's certain presuppositions that they use. Yeah? And I think everybody has a bias in that sense. Yeah? We all do. Yeah? To give you an example, a friend of mine interviewed different Adventist historians, some in the church, some outside, that left Adventism, and he asked the question, so what do you think is our methodology? Is there an Adventist studies methodology or something like this? And they said, well, there isn't really. And then one of the two scholars interviewed said, well, asking the other one, have you heard about Denis Kaiser, his book Trust and Doubt and so on? And he was like, no, I haven't, and so on, yeah. And so then he said, yeah, it's an interesting case because he does thorough historical scholarship, he evaluates the sources, yeah. He critiques also some of the people that have written about Adventist history, so he does a very thorough job, but he is not critical enough towards Ellen White. So I don't know. So he may be an apologist, but there may be a historian in him. And so my friend who interviewed them, he said what he realized and observed was that they think they are objective, but they don't realize that they have also a bias, and their bias is basically you have to be critical towards Ellen White. If you don't criticize her, you're not a real scholar. And so I think I try to pursue more historical research where I try to understand people for their own sake. And not so much about let's criticize them. For example, even there's a person, Dudley M. Kenwright. He left the church. He was a critic of the Adventist church for decades. His materials were used against Adventism. And when I read even his Adventist writings, I have to say, I don't really like the guy. If I would have met him, I would have had problems with him. But still, I tried to understand him for his own sake. And so therefore, when somebody said, well, he was a verbal inspirationist, I say, well, actually, we have no direct evidence for that. So it looks like I defend him. I'm not defending him. I'm just, based on the research, I have to say there is no conclusive evidence that he did. There are statements where he says Ellen White claimed verbal inspiration, which she didn't, but she claimed verbal inspiration, but it doesn't fit with the evidence. Is it just an argument for argument's sake, or does he believe that? It's not clear. So I think we have to be honest with the documents. In that sense, try to establish what did the people think happened, but also kind of compare and contrast it with especially contemporary evidence. I could give a number of examples, maybe in the break, because we have no time left, where I see a difference in the methodology. Just to pinpoint it, I find that people that are more faith-affirming often do thorough documentary research, descriptive studies, but they don't engage in much, interpretation. What I see with some other people is that they do some documentary research, and based on a few findings, then they begin to interpret it. And then I see a lot of speculation because it's not based on a good basis of research. Because with only a partial evidence from the sources, you have a distorted picture in the end. But to do that, you need time. So in that sense, they are stronger when it comes to interpretation, but without a good basis in research, you have a lot of speculation.
Thank you very much again to Dr. Kaiser for this presentation. Any other questions should be addressed in private afterwards. Please receive this certificate of participation and presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All the blessings. We move on to the next presenter. He is Sanid Lubani, coming from very far away, from the Adventist University of Malawi. There he's a theology lecturer. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy. You can probably connect meanwhile. So he's a Doctor of Philosophy with emphasis in New Testament studies. We studied at the same institution, IAS, Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies in the Philippines. His research interests are in synoptic gospels, discipleship, New Testament history, and socio-cultural background, as well as Adventist theological education in Africa. His topic today is called Mainstreaming Women Inclusion in Adventist Theological Education, a case study. Looking forward to listen to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Professor Moti, for such an introduction, and at the same time, I would also like to thank my brother Adrian and many other friends who made it a possibility that I should come and attend this conference. And I'm so glad that I've gotten to know a number of you, and I hope to meet and know each other very well. And I'm also glad to meet Professor Mbaleka, who is with us this morning. And we were together at IS when I was a student, and he was already a professor. And thank you for wonderful inspiration and as far as research is concerned. My presentation, as it has already been said, it is entitled Mainstreaming Women Inclusion in Adventist Theological Education Institutions, a case study. You may have heard that my major is New Testament studies. However, when I went back home last year and began to teach, all my classes are full of male students. I look at the faculty, all of them, male faculty. Fine, at first it was easy for me to handle, even though when I look at other departments on campus, like education department, agriculture department, business department, there are females and there are males there. But when I got the invitation to come here, I looked at the theme, Contemporary Innovations, Challenges and Opportunities. And I realized that we have a contemporary challenge at Malawi Adventist University, which is male domination in the theology department. And you can just take a look at our room here, and you realize that this is truly a contemporary challenge. Dealing with such a topic, it can also be a hot potato of some kind. Actually, those who knew that I'm coming here and I'm going to make this presentation already had to talk to me and say, what are you thinking? And a lot of people, I mean a lot, if you go to my Facebook page, they have made a lot of bad comments, thinking that I'm lost. So you can see where I am coming from and the issues which we are dealing with. Theological education is one of the disciplines in tertiary education which attracts both male and female students. Such students end up serving as church pastors, chaplains, Bible workers, leaders, counselors, faculty, etc. However, while some theological institutions boast of diverse student and faculty body, others struggle with gender inclusivity. As such, mainstreaming the inclusion of women in theological education remains a contemporary challenge in some theological educational institutions, including our own at Malawi Adventist University. So even though I'm inclined to present something from the New Testament, I said, let me move away from the New Testament and look at something that is somehow practical and try to address the challenges which we are facing in theological education. So the statement of the problem states that absence and exclusion of women as students and faculty in advanced theological institutions remain a contemporary challenge which needs innovative ways to avert it. There is no tool there to avert it. So male counterparts continue to dominate in the theological discipline. And as I was looking at literature, you're going to find that there is lack of primary research in as far as this area. Primary research in terms of listening to the different voices other than just doing documentary research in this area. So this is what developed a lot of interest in as far as this research is concerned. And in this research, I'm trying to answer the following questions. What are the factors precipitating the exclusion of women from studying theology and becoming ministers? What challenges do women face in Adventist theological education practices that discourage them from enrolling to study theology? What techniques can be used to encourage women to enroll in the study of theology? And finally, what opportunities are there if women's inclusion is mainstreamed? And I'm going to use a qualitative case study, and I'm so glad that Professor Mbaleka is here. Actually, I was telling him that in our New Testament studies, usually we go for our exegesis and these other methods which we use. So it's rare to hear of a New Testament scholar talking about qualitative study, but I'm just trying to swim and see if I can survive. Among my respondents, there are 3 former lady students, and these are the only women who studied theology in the history of our institution. So there are 3 ladies. One of them is a pastor. She has served for close to 10 years. She's now a departmental director, while the other 2 are teaching, one in a government school, and the other one is a pastor's wife, and she's teaching at an Adventist school. 2 current lady students, these are the only women currently studying religion, but as an educational major, not as a theology major, but they do take classes in the theology department, and these also made part of my respondents. And I also interviewed 6 deans of the theology department, 5 former deans, and 1 current dean. So all respondents were interviewed using an open-ended questionnaire, and data was analyzed thematically. So the goal of the study is to shed light on the parameters affecting the exclusion of women from Adventist theological education, but also to initiate a conversation among Adventist theological institutions on the best practices to inspire women to study theology and serve in different church positions as do their male counterparts. I did a literature review, but what I'm going to show you now is just a representative literature of what is there. And I want to admit that in as far as my search is concerned, there is limited literature, more especially from Adventists in as far as women in theological education is concerned. One of the studies which I found is a doctoral dissertation by Hane B. Guzman, and the study is entitled Brazilian Adventist Women and Their Needs Toward Theological, Missiological Education with an Initial Curriculum Proposal. So it's more of assessing the needs of Brazilian women and come up with a curriculum which can serve such needs. So this is a PhD dissertation from Andrews University. But there is also a Malawian scholar. Her name is Isabel Apao-Pili. She wrote this article, Major Challenges for African Women Theologians in Theological Education. And what I found is that outside the Adventist world, there is progress in as far as inclusion of women theologians is concerned. And reading her article gave me an idea that our friends out there have made a lot of progress than we have done. And Felicia Chinyere Priest responds to the major challenges which Isabel Apao-Pili raised. And actually, one of the problems which Isabel Apao-Pili raised is that there is a problem in a gender-inclusive curriculum in as far as theology is concerned. And Felicia Chinyere Priest picked that particular problem and tried to address it, but from a Nigerian context. There is also another study which was published in the Ministry magazine of August 2001. It's in 2 parts, Evolving Adventist Theological Education, written by Hatton A. Williams. And in this article, he has traced the historical perspective of Adventist theological education. And in the second part, she looks at in-field supervision, mentoring, and in ministry. Reading this article, it is very interesting to look at where we are coming from and where we are going. But you can actually see that there is still a gap in as far as women inclusion is concerned among Seventh-day Adventists. Another MA thesis was written at Adventist University of Africa by Laurențiu Same, entitled The Role of Theological Training in Pastoral Ministry Within the Seventh-day Adventist Church, a case study of the Theological Seminary at the Adventist University of Africa. In this whole dissertation, there are only 8 lines about women, just 8 lines. I actually had to count 8 lines, but it's talking about the role of theological training in pastoral ministry. A good article written by Harriet Ikane entitled Theological Education of the Seventh-day Adventist Women in Nigeria, a journal which was published in the Journal of Adventist Mission in 2020. She did a good job in trying to look at this issue of women inclusion. What I missed is how that can be mainstreamed, but what she did is also a commendable job. And another good study was done by Drin Somasundram, a gender-inclusive model in theological education for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is a doctoral of professional studies dissertation from Middlesex University. He also did a good job in coming up with a gender-inclusive model, but I want us to look at it. It's just a model. When you try to look at how that can be mainstreamed, there is also a gap, a lack in that. A biblical perspective on women and theological education. I won't go too much into details of what the Bible says, but we can all agree here that the Bible do shed some light on how women were involved in ministry, more especially in the Gospels when Jesus Christ was ministering. Harriet Ikane, commenting on that, she said, and I quote, "Despite the New Testament precedents of women's involvement in mission, in many contexts today, women's participation in theological education in order to become relevant in the church's mission is not encouraged or even welcomed," end quote. So she commented, having looked at how much women were involved and at how much has been done to date. What about Ellen White? What did she say about theological education of women? I found a number of quotes, but let me just read with you a few quotes which I have put in this presentation. From the book, The Desire of Ages, page 822, she said, and I quote, I'm sorry, I forgot to put quotes there. It's a direct quote. "The Savior's commission to the disciples included all the believers. It includes all believers in Christ to the end of time. It is a fatal mistake to suppose that the work of saving souls depend alone on the ordained minister. All to whom heavenly inspiration has come are put in trust with the gospel. All who receive the life of Christ are ordained to work for the salvation of their fellow men." Wonderful quote. For this reason, for this work, the church was established, and all who take up themselves its sacred vows are thereby pledged to be co-workers with Christ. The other quote comes from the book Evangelism, page 229 to 230, and I quote, she says, "The youth should be encouraged to attend our training schools for Christian workers, which should become more and more like the schools of prophets. These institutions have been established, and if they are conducted in harmony with his purpose, the youth sent to them will quickly be prepared to engage in various lines of missionary work. Some will be trained to enter the field as missionary nurses, some as canvassers, and some as gospel ministers," end quote. Finally, I want to read with you from Ellen White's book, Gospel Workers, page 192, the emphasis, I have supplied it, and I quote, "We should be people we should be people of the word, mighty in the scriptures, and our women should be as earnest in this matter as our consecrated men working along such lines. Take note of that. The plan of holding Bible readings was a heaven-born idea. There are many, both men and women, who can engage in this branch of missionary labor. Workers may thus be developed who will become mighty men of God, end quote. So you can see that in the emphasis, I have highlighted how both men and women are called to the study and ministry of the word. So what were my areas of inquiry? My areas of inquiry were 6 in number. I was looking at awareness and perception, challenges and opportunities, theological doctrinal barriers, personal experiences, support and advocacy, and the future outlook. What did I find in my data collection, analysis, and synthesis? In terms of awareness of the involvement of women in theological education, I found that there were some variations. 2 of my respondents said that they were not aware of the involvement of women in theological education, and 2 of them said that they were aware, and 7 of them said that they were highly aware, but the variations speak volumes. On whether there is adequate representation of women in advanced theological institutions, that is in this particular case study of our university, it was clear that there is none. In terms of challenges and opportunities, I found that putting together thematically, there are cognitive challenges. First and foremost, there is a mindset challenge that women cannot study theology. Secondly, lack of flexibility to a new and different understanding, inferiority complex among women, but also conformity to the prevailing attitude against women. In terms of professional challenges, it was found that there is actually a gender bias, but also discrimination. Because, say, for example, when a woman is taken by the conferences in the country to be a women's ministries director, these are not given an equal remuneration as to men. They are simply given a stipend, and even after their term, they are not given any gratuity, which is a very big challenge. So there is gender bias, discrimination, and equal remuneration, no gratuity, but also lack of professional support among them. I also found that there are cultural challenges. Being a male-dominant society with a patrilineal cultural system, since most Malawians migrated from South Africa, and most of them are Ngunis, and these are male-dominant societies, women must be in the background. So there is also male prejudice, apart from the fact that there is lack of exposure. When you said that women can still serve as ministers and in other capacities in the gospel ministry, many do not understand how that is possible. In terms of academic challenges, my respondents talked about lack of knowledge and training in theology being another primary challenge which women are facing. And theological challenges, the main theological challenge which was pointed out by my respondents is that the Bible is being used to support women suppression and domination. In terms of opportunities, the following opportunities came out clearly from my respondents. My respondents said that women make a majority of the country's population, but also the church membership. Women ministries department, leadership, and its programs are also an opportunity through which women inclusion can be mainstreamed. We have a female pastor in the country who is serving, and she's there on the ground. That is an opportunity. People should be able to see that. But also using gender justice, we can also find an opportunity in that, and then linking women scholarship to theology. Just as we saw it yesterday, many women participating. How about linking women scholarship to theology? This is what my respondents talked about. I also asked them if there are theological and doctrinal barriers. Thank God, all my respondents said that in as far as this church is concerned, there is no theological, there isn't any theological, but also doctrinal barrier. I smiled. In terms of personal experiences in theological education institutions, my respondents, more especially those who studied theology and the ladies who are studying religion, all of them have said that there is no abuse observed or experienced, no discrimination, no discouragement, which means that the future outlook is bright. In terms of support and advocacy, when I asked them if there is any other support within the Adventist community to be included in theology, they said that there is none. But when I asked them, what do you think would be advocacy initiatives which can be used in order to include women in theological education, they said that there should be intentional women involvement. First, secondly, they said that recruitment campaigns for female theology students would also help. That is making it intentional, purposeful. Scholarships for women in theology, they pointed that out as another advocacy initiative. They also talked about mobilization of support for women, or awareness campaign of women in theology, that those who are already studied theology or who studied theology should be used to make other women aware that they can also study theology. In terms of optimism about the prospect of increased women inclusion in Adventist theological education in the future, what I found is that there is moderate optimism. On the scale of 1 to 5, some said, yeah, they would say 2, some would say 3, some would say 4. So what I found is that there is moderate optimism. Reasons for the optimism, they said that God's call for inclusion in mission has been made to all. They also talked about the Great Gospel Commission. They also talked about the availability of female elders. You may wish to know that in Malawi, we have women female elders in most churches. And currently, as I was doing my ministerial practicum supervision for my students, I found that even in the churches in the rural areas are now beginning to have women as elders in their churches. That's one thing you may wish to know. A woman who is a pastor is in ministry at the moment is also a reason for such optimism. And 2 of my respondents said that there is also a change in the voting trend for women ordination. So they said that the trend is also promising. So there is hope. So this is the summary of my findings. I've already looked at it. Recommendations from this study is that I've made 7 recommendations as we are Seventh-day Adventists. The first recommendation is representation. There should be adequate representation of women inclusivity in every facet of ministry and theological scholarship. We should try as much as we can. Education and awareness. Educating the church about women inclusivity to foster understanding and acceptance by organizing workshops, seminars, providing resources for further learning. And point number 3, policy. Implement policies that promotes inclusivity. I was so glad to find that on the TED website, but also NAD website, there is that intentional direction in as far as coming up with a policy towards women inclusion. I'm so glad that NAD is very intentional because theirs is well staggered with a number of points which I'm going to share with you very shortly. Point number 4, church community engagement. This is broader community engagement in promoting inclusivity and acceptance. And point number should be 6, women in ministry scholarships. That is provision of financial assistance to women wishing to enroll in ministerial theological training. As I was doing my research, I actually found that SPD has scholarships in all the 5 universities in their division. Scholarships, all of them. And I found that in NAD, there is also funding in as far as women in ministry is concerned. And even in terms of institutional practices, there should be a change. Actually, if you go to NAD website, they're talking of communicate, recruit, mentor, fund. And these are the 4 points which they're following. Communicate, recruit, mentor, and fund. And this is towards both men and what? Men and women. And I found this to be a very wonderful institutional practice. And finally, the issue of advocacy, that is engaging in advocacy for raising awareness, mobilize support, and effect change. Thank you so much. May God bless you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lubani, for your presentation. I would like to give the floor to our audience. Please, if there is any question, raise your hand and you have your time. Yes, we have a question here.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Professor. So I have a question. How do you think the understanding of ordination would impact the problem in discussion? So the understanding of ordination.
I'm going to answer your question, and thank you so much, first and foremost. Depending on the views which have been shared to me once they learned that I'm going to talk about mainstreaming women inclusion in Adventist theological institutions. Most people who have come to me and say, why are you dealing with this topic? You know that in our division, it was agreed that women should not be ordained. Why should you go ahead and do it? Don't you think you're bringing confusion? And you're going to find that even some women have come to accept that, meaning to say that the issue, the fact that up to now, our division does not accept that women should be ordained truly can affect those who can come to enroll to study a theology, because they see that even if they study theology, graduate, and go and out there to minister, their ministry may not be accepted. However, I'm so glad that in such a situation, there is this woman I'm telling you about who was also one of my respondents, who took the bull by the horns, studied theology, and she's out there. She's been, I think, to 3 districts, and she has served 2 terms as a departmental director in the Central Malawi Conference. So, yeah, it can affect, but at the same time, it also calls for those who understand what the Lord says to us in as far as going unto the world and make disciples of all nations, and decide to ignore all these voices and choose to serve the Lord and the Lord alone. Yeah.
Thank you. There is time for other questions. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. That was a very exciting presentation to see what is happening. I remember when I was serving at the Adventist University of Africa, we had also a scholarship for women, which was sending a message, intentional message to the whole continent of Africa to have, to really consider women for ministry without getting involved in ordination, because that has to be decided by the whole General Conference. But have you seen this also happening at your university? Let's take it home. The Adventist University of Malawi, what is happening as far as scholarship is concerned for women? Is that something that you have?
Again,
do you have scholarship for women at the Adventist University of Malawi?
Scholarships.
If not, what can you do about that?
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, there isn't any other scholarship at our university. However, recently, as I was doing my data collection process, I learned from the Malawi Union Ministries director that there is a scholarship in the Women Ministries department, and there is only one woman who accessed it, and when she accessed it, she was studying education. So in the process of our discussion, I thought that we would use that to help us to mainstream women inclusion, because we are in the middle of our semester, and one lady student said that she wants to come and study theology, but she has no money to pay. And I made mention of that Women Ministries scholarship as one of the tools which can be used to help us mainstream women inclusion at Malawi Adventist University. So probably with this passion in this research and the fact that there are also women who are interested. I strongly believe that after this presentation and making sure that we try to implement it, we'll take advantage of that. So that's the only scholarship at the moment. But the university itself, no, we don't have any right from our institution. We don't have any. But I'm so glad what Dr. Kaiser talked about, about looking for support from private individuals, because we are private individuals. I know two who are sponsoring pastors. Private individuals sponsoring pastors. So when he mentioned about private individuals, and one of the scholarship, I'm the one who is managing it. So I'm thinking that that can also greatly help. Sure, but it depends on trust, as he said. Sure.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a fascinating topic. And did it well in that sense. I don't want to ask a question, just make some encouraging remarks. Yeah? I have had a number of female students in my classes, and I always found that in general, they were the brightest students. Unfortunately, they were the brightest students in the class, but unfortunately, many of them were not theology majors. So they often knew more about the Bible and Adventist history and things than their male counterparts. Yeah. At Andrews in the physics department, they have had an interesting development in the last couple of years. They had, in this area, it was male-dominated. Physics is like, who wants to study physics? It's just males. Yeah? But then at some time, they hired 2 new professors, and they were both female professors. And as a result, the student demographics completely changed, to the point where now 50% of the students are females. And the question is like, why does that happen? And I think it has to do with having a role model. So in that sense, it takes time probably, but as soon as there are other role models, like other women that work in administrative positions or as teachers, then other women will feel encouraged to kind of walk in their footsteps. Yeah? So in that sense, thank you for your work. Yeah?
Thank you so much, Dr. Kaiser, on that. Actually, as I was interviewing the only female student, pastor who is the departmental director at one of the conferences, I was asking her about her master's degree. So she has a master's degree in counseling and psychology. And because we have a course, pastoral counseling and psychology, and I was asking her, if we invite you to teach, are you willing to come? She said, yes. So with what you have said, I think that would be one of the ways of trying to begin to bring her so that the ladies can also see that here is a pastor who is also teaching at least a course. She is a departmental director. I think we can bring her, on part-time basis to teach that particular course and model. So thank you so much for sharing with me that insight. God bless you.
I think there is time for one quick question, one quick answer. Okay?
Hello, I know I got here late, but on my way here I followed online, so I saw your presentation online. I've been having these thoughts, and I was wondering if my thoughts were properly Christian or if I was being heretic. I was wondering how come Jesus and God allowed only men to write the Bible, and the answer that I found within myself was that Jesus did have women followers, and Mary Magdalene, and had friends, and I'm sure there was like the equivalent of a feminist movement even back then, because I'm sure women knew that it wasn't right for them to be stoned, etc. So I was wondering if ever since then women have been on a mission of spreading Jesus' word, like missionaries, instead of as the equivalent of men who wrote the Bible. Is that a thought that makes sense?
Okay, can you come again in the latter part of the question?
Does it make sense for me to believe that in the way that the gospel was spread in the Bible that was written only by men, is it right for me to believe that the gospel has been shared vocally by women ever since Jesus spoke to women as well?
I don't know if I got you correctly, but looking at what we have in the Bible, yes, we can admit that most authors are men, but you're going to find that within these books, there are wonderful stories of women of faith, both in the Old and the New Testament. So we can talk of Miriam in the Old Testament, we can talk of Prophet Huldah, we can talk of Esther, we can talk of Ruth, whose stories inspire faith. And we find the same even among the followers of Jesus, that there were women who were following him. And some of them were actually raising funds to make sure that Jesus Christ's ministry is well supported. And after Jesus Christ ministered, we go into the Acts of the Apostles. We also find that there are a lot of active women. If you read your Bible, more especially in Romans chapter 16, there is a whole list of women Paul had to write, and understanding the Greco-Roman world and women who are active in ministry. When Paul wrote, you realize that that was out of that particular world for Paul to have such kind of a list of women who were ministering. So briefly, we can say that such an understanding gives us an idea to say that women have a place in as far as serving the Lord is concerned. So we may choose not to be influenced so much by the fact that it was only just men who wrote, but that within those stories, there are stories of a lot of women of faith, and we need such today. Thank you.
Dr. Lubani, thank you very much again. Please receive this certificate of participation from us, and thank you very much.
Our next presenter is very known to us, I think, Laurențiu Florentin Moț. He's a PhD graduate of IAS in the Philippines, and he's a New Testament scholar with a special interest in the area of New Testament Greek grammar, linguistics, and the book of Revelation. At Adventus University, he's currently the rector and the theology department chair. He published several books, 3 of which are morphological and syntactical irregularities in the book of Revelation with Brill, 2015, Angels and Beasts with Whip and Stalk, 2017, and then Nearness and Delay of Parousia, but in Romanian, Apropierea și întârzierea Parousiei, 2022, and he published also over 40 academic articles and chapters in books so far. He's a regular participant, as we already heard, at the SBL annual meetings and a member of Biblical Research Committee and a PhD advisor at the University of Bucharest. And I should say he's a friend of many of us here, if not all. His topic this morning will be Miracles of Jesus in the context of naturalism. Thank you very much for presenting this. We have like 20 minutes, and we will reserve 10 minutes for questions and answers.
Thank you very much for the introduction and also for the technical help. I come to this topic from two independent researchers, and I try to join them for this, for the theme of our conference, because I thought it's relevant to it. I'll jump to the introduction. Until the Enlightenment, the idea that the miracles recounted in the Bible happened as the sacred writers described them was widely accepted. With the rise of rationalism, that is 17th and 18th century, an alternative model that miracles are not possible in naturalistic metaphysics developed. Academic research has turned this view into a fundamental premise that it is often assumed a priori. The aim of this study is to revisit the miracles of Jesus and explain them in dialogue with naturalistic skepticism and ancient Jewish worldview about God and nature. First of all, what is a miracle? And how did it come to be seen as impossible in a naturalistic environment or framework? A miracle is a fact or event occurring outside the bounds of the normal or natural order. The prospect of higher forces interfering with our world has been considered plausible for many centuries, but with the development of modern science, the world began to be seen as a closed system, subject to the laws of nature. And remember this closed system. I'll speak briefly about three important actors. Number one is Baruch Spinoza, who in 1670 published a treatise, Theological and Political. He was a Jew, a refugee in Holland in the 17th century, and in the 6th chapter of this work, he deals with miracles. He was a pantheist in his view, which equals, if you want, God with nature. God is nature. Because of that, he opposes the idea that when something unusual happens in the world, it has an external or a divine cause. Since the world is closed and God is nature, everything has a natural explanation, according to him. The Jews of antiquity, he said, told miracle stories in which they wanted to prove to the pagans that their gods, often related to the elements of nature, were subject to the God of the Jews. Spinoza postulates that since everything that happens in nature is subject to the laws of nature, what people call miracle is in fact the impression of the ignorant man, who cannot explain a phenomenon which, although unusual for him, is nevertheless a normal manifestation of nature. An example he gives is the rainbow. Is it a miraculous intervention of God somewhere in the skies, or is it the result of the refraction and reflection of sunlight through raindrops? He might be correct in some details, but wrong in the fundamental proposal. First of all, God is not nature. He is the creator of nature, according to the Bible. Therefore, neither is he a prisoner of nature's laws, as John Lennox, for example, says. A supernatural intervention of God, this is the second actor, actually, Voltaire. He published in 1764 a dictionary of philosophy. And he pleads for the following: a supernatural intervention of God, contrary to the laws established by him, would negate his power and wisdom to create a perfect design from the beginning. This reasoning would only be true in a perfect world. Yet the present world is not the initial one. It's a mutation, a sinful deviation from the original. In this context, divine interventions are expected and legitimate, even inside naturalistic environment or framework. Voltaire is disturbed that theologians, philosophers of his time believed that the miracles of Jesus and the apostles were real, but regarded with skepticism later miraculous accounts in church history. He pleads for negative consistency. If later miracles are not true, neither should the earlier ones be. Yet contemporary voices, as we will see later, plead for positive consistency. Because the current even, miracles are true, so should the earlier. And the third actor is David Hume. As an empiricist and skeptic, Hume recommends testing supernatural claims with evidence, experience being the only guide to belief formation. For him, eyewitness accounts carry the most weight, but only if those testimonies are consistent with ordinary facts as we know them. Of course, he continues, the reliability of witness accounts depends on their number and credibility, as well as on whether they contradict each other. Miracle is a violation of the law's nature, he says. Death, for example, is a uniform experience. Resurrection, on the other hand, is a miracle in that sense. If someone were to tell Hume that he or she had seen a person who had been resurrected, the Scottish philosopher would believe the man's account only if the falsity of his testimony were more miraculous than the supposed resurrection. Hume always rejects the greater miracle. In the example given, the resurrection. He expects the eyewitness to an alleged miracle to be of sufficient number, to be of good sense, to be educated, to have integrity, to have much to lose in reputation if they are found to be lying. He also expects miracle to have happened in public and in a known and civilized land. Well, if you look at these colorful words that I highlighted, much of Jesus's miracles as they are in the Bible qualify. I can't go into details for the sake of time. One of the contemporary authors most qualified to talk about miracles in an academic manner is the American theologian Craig Keener, professor of biblical studies at Asbury Seminary. He believes that anti-supernaturalism has become an inflexible premise in Western thought, but that we now have a significant body of evidence to challenge its claims. In an impressive tome of over 1,200 pages, Keener published a study in 2011 in which he attempted to demonstrate two things, one historical and the other one theological. The first was the claim that the claim of miraculous acts, which witnesses claim on the pages of Scripture, should not be dismissed simply on the grounds that there is no supernatural possible. The biographies, the Gospels, and historiographies such as Acts contain much historical credible information. It's not normal, Keener believes, for miracles to simply be discredited. This is because they are embedded in historical credible documents. So again, because the sources are credible or reliable, so the account in them should be treated respectfully and, from the premise that it's possible that happened. Nor should they be dismissed on the grounds that they are ancient sources, impossible to verify. Most of the hundreds of pages the American theologian has written about miracles documented a wealth of contemporary accounts of extreme healing. They are not only numerous in number, but also supported by several eyewitnesses, and above all, by the observations of medical specialists who confirm the extra-normal element, as Skinner puts it, in the events in question. So he documents many healings, contemporary healings, with eyewitnesses and so on. The second point Keener is at pains to demonstrate is that divine intervention cannot be excluded from plausible explanations for the causes of unusual cures, even if it may not be the only explanation. Like medicine may contribute to the healing of somebody, but that does not exclude divine intervention, in other words. The author acknowledges that there are also unusual occurrences in our day that should not immediately be attributed to God. But the miraculous accounts of the New Testament are generally credited to the power of God manifested through Jesus or the apostles. In fact, the proposition, this is somebody else, the proposition science is the only way to know if something is true is itself a claim that cannot be proven by science. Therefore, we have to go a little further than its claims. Indeed, science measures facts and phenomena, but interpreting them takes the approach of science into the area of hermeneutics and philosophy. Kinner's words in a 2021 paper, again on miracles, is the following. Those who refuse to believe in miracles unless God acts predictably in a scientific experiment, or like in a scientific experiment, are looking for God in the wrong place, ignoring the signs God normally provides. The God they seek is not the God revealed in the Bible. And I like C.S. Lewis in 2009, the edition is from 2009. He says, the impossibility of empirical proof is a spiritual necessity. A man who knows empirically that an event was caused by his prayer would feel like a magician. His head would turn and his heart would corrupt. So it's good that we don't have always these proofs. Now, these ideas from philosophy that I spoke of earlier impacted, influenced what is called historical Jesus research, especially the first quest. This is 18th and 19th century. And I would just mention 4 names. Well, you can see them on the screen. I save time by not talking about them. But the core of their teaching is that the historical Jesus was but a human figure embellished with supernatural descriptions that must be dispensed with. Even his divine sonship was nothing farther than the sonship of every human being. So this is what, the first quest of historical Jesus proclaimed and proposed. Now, let me go to the miracles of Jesus now. So we saw a little bit of the academic discussions around it. Now, in the Bible, we have, first of all, 5 actually terms that express the idea of something miraculous. That is the word sign, or the word power, powerful work, the word wonder, the phrase in English, an incredible act, and also the simple word work, but in reference to something unusual. Now, there are 5 types of miracles that Jesus performed. Number 1, healings. Most of them are healings. Number 2, multiplication of food articles. Wine, first miracle at the wedding of Cana, and 2 times he multiplied bread and fish. Exorcisms, there are many, but not as many as healings. Manifesting authority over nature, when he calms down the sea, for example. And also raising people from the dead, 3 cases. Lazarus, the most famous. Now, his first sign, as I mentioned, took place in Cana of Galilee. So when he was adult. This goes in striking opposition to later apocryphal gospels, which have Jesus perform various wondrous acts as a child. And I have a few examples, but for the sake of time, I have to jump. So the gospels have recorded no miracle of Jesus before he began his public ministry as an adult. Beyond these individual cases from the Gospels, there are instances in which the evangelists related that Jesus performed, quote, many miracles or healed many, drove out many demons, and generally many other things. So he did many other things, so many that if every one of them were written down, I suppose, John says, that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. So he performed many more than what was specifically described. Some of these miracles extended their impact beyond the mere domination over the natural world. Physical healings were coupled with forgiveness, for example. Jesus' power over nature was meant to enlarge their perspective over who he was. And some healings accomplished on the Sabbath were designed to correct erroneous views on how the 4th commandment applies in the case of the sick. So it's not only divine power, but also theology and other things. related, spiritual life. Now, as a case for miracles, I would like to mention a few arguments in favor of treating Jesus' miracles as real, as real interventions. Looking at the gospel accounts, the disbelief effect of Jesus' miracles is intriguing. And I would like to mention the following. The opponents, the Jewish opponents, the eyewitnesses that did not accept the miracles, did not deny Jesus' supernatural acts, but rather reinterpreted them as accomplishments of Beelzebul, the ruler of demons. So they denied the source, not the act. Number two, Jesus' numerous miracles were the confirmation to the uncertain John the Baptist that he is, after all, the one expected to come. For those who could not see beyond these, any supplementary wonder work was denied. So, like I said, some of them saw the miracles, denied the source. Others saw the miracles and denied the effects. But they were eyewitnesses. So even if you are an eyewitness, this does not automatically qualify you for seeing well. After the apostolic generation, this would be the third argument, Jesus continued to be remembered as a miracle worker, especially by those who used his name to perform outstanding deeds. And you find that in the church fathers. There were people, at least there are testimonies that they were performing miracles in the name of Jesus. Then there are cases when Jesus expressly commanded the healed to keep the matter a secret. This shows that the miracles account are not in itself instruments of messianic propaganda. So I like that Jesus sometimes closed that for him and for the beneficiary. This speaks in favor. Jesus never accomplished any miracle for his own benefit, although he was tempted to do so. I'm saying this in comparison to other miracle performers that made wonders works in their favor or as defense, in defense of their own life and situation. 2 more slides. My findings are the following. Number 1, based on the belief that God is outside nature, he must not be limited to the predictable behavior of nature. Number 2, experience is a good guide when it is not limited to our own experience. So we have to credit also the experience of others. Number 3, the gospel miracles are plausible because their accounts are reliable. Number 4, the meaning of an unusual event cannot be retrieved through science itself. Science only measures or describes, but through hermeneutics. So you have to interpret what you see. You have to interpret what you measured. And lastly, eyewitnessing, as described in the Gospels, does not guarantee lucidity and faith. You can see and still not believe. So even if modern science would ask to have a miracle in the Bible repeated under their own eyes, that it in itself is not a condition that they will finally believe because they saw it. We had eyewitnesses in the Bible that saw it and still did not believe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We are now at the questions and answers section. So if there's any question regarding the presentation that we had, please raise your hand and then the mic will go to you. Okay, we have here in front.
Thank you for your presentation. I think that the presentation somehow solved the challenges, but I'm curious, what are the opportunities which we can extract from your presentation?
Thank you very much. I think it depends on the society. If I speak of the Romanian society, we are quite Western, even though not so advanced like the rest of the Western world. So once in a while, we have to use this topic reach out to the unbelieving Romania or unbelieving audience, because I think it's a topic that, at least for some of them, is important. It's easy to go to debate between Christians and non-Christians, for example, on YouTube, and see that this is a recurrent a topic that comes recurrently in the discussion. So I think that's an opportunity. Just use it as an evangelistic or, let's say, apologetic tool.
Thank you. Other questions here? Yeah, our colleague Sunny Lubani.
Thank you so much, Prof, for the presentation. Coming from an African background, you know that the issue of miracles is also one of the tools which is being used to deceive many. And I was just looking at one of the quotes where you talked about the one writing being a person of integrity and all that. However, I was just looking at the fact that it is being used as a tool for deception. In the African context, I know that you may not have been there, but you know what is happening. What would be your advice or your view as to how miracles should be looked at? Because I'm looking at the African context as another extreme also, where now the guys out there are just using them to deceive many. How would one avoid that kind of an extreme so that we remain where we are supposed to be?
Yes, well, the question is excellent. I would probably, if I had to present this in your context, 95% would be a different thing. Just because I know that, I know from distance that that's the case. I think in that context, I would probably, I don't have to preoccupy myself with pleading for miracles in the sense that they are possible, because probably this is not an issue there. Rather, I would focus on how to distinguish between a divine caused miracle, using the Bible, of course, and other types of miracles that are used, that are described in the Bible, and they are not performed by a man of God. I do see that in the Bible here and there. We have false Christs that do that. We have, especially in these eschatological passages like 2 Thessalonians 2, like Revelation 13, we have this motif of false miracles going on. Jesus' discourse, Olivet Discourse, tackles this. So I would probably do this. I would compare with the Bible what is, how do I distinguish between, I would try to show how do I distinguish between a miracle performed by a man of God and by somebody else. Actually, let me say just this, and I finish. In the debates between Christians and atheists, miracles from Africa are an argument that something is going on, even if it's not necessarily the right source, but something is going on. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Another question?
Thank you for your presentation. How do you see the importance of miracles of Jesus compared with the messianic prophecies from missionary point of view?
So how do I see? Sorry, the speakers are too far from me, and sometimes I don't understand. So
importance of Jesus' miracles compared with the prophetic prophecies of Jesus.
So if I compare the miracles of Jesus with prophecies, messianic prophecies about Jesus,
in missionary field.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends what I want to accomplish. I hope I will address what you are interested. But for example, if I'm interested to build faith in the Bible, I would probably focus on the messianic prophecies. because they are a way to emphasize the trustworthiness of the document, of the Bible. Something was predicted in it, and it happened at a later date. With miracles, for example, I would say they are instruments of, let's say, propagating the message about Jesus, but not in the sense of what they did we should also do always, because it's not the case, right? For example, we're not called necessarily to make miracles today, but those stories are real. We can speak about God's interventions. They are possible, they are real. And like I said in one of parentheses, some miracles of Jesus are connected with important themes like forgiveness of sins or understanding who Jesus was. And I would combine them like that.
All right, I'm just looking at time. Short question, short answer, and it can continue in the break, okay? Georgia? Yeah. Just address the question, at least to have a chance to give a short feedback.
It's not a short question, unfortunately, but from my personal research, you mentioned Adolf von Harnack uses 4 arguments against the resurrection and the miracles performed by Jesus. I will mention 2 of them. One of these arguments says that usually at the time, people attributed miracles deeds to heroes after their lives. The second argument says that there are no miracles, but only unexplainable phenomena that we will understand later on the basis of science, so that the gospel accounts capture unexplainable things, but these accounts do not necessarily mean the presence of the supernatural. How do we respond to these arguments? Thank you.
I'll probably have to see the arguments again, if you don't mind. We can continue this conversation in a break, just for the sake of time, because I need to first see and then process them a little bit. Thank you for them. I think they are important, and I would only say this at this point, that Jesus' resurrection, for example, is a different miracle, I would say. I focused more on what he performed, but that kind of discussion that you raised up is related to also what happened to Jesus, you know? And we'll probably have to do that in our conversation after.
Thank you very much. Here is a certificate of participation. Thank you for your presentation. God bless. We have now a tea break for 15 minutes, but please be back before 11:45, okay? So that we may start on time. On my right side, your left side, I invite you to go, eat, talk, ask questions, and connect. Thank you.